Hello again, guys. We're going to continue our chronological study here, and today we're going to be in Matthew 12, 1 through 21. We're going to be in Mark 2, 23 through Mark 3, 19, so into the next chapter, and then we're going to be in Luke 6, 1 through 16. This will also be a two-part video because in this case I cannot read all of the scripture at one time. We need to go through, in order to keep with the chronology, read a little bit of each one, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and then we'll describe it from there. And so I go ahead and put my fingers in my scripture here. You should do something similar. So go ahead and find those chapters and get yourself acquainted, and that way you can easily flip back and forth, and of course you can always pause the screen. And so let's get started. Okay, so we're going to be reading first in Matthew 12, beginning in verse 1, and I'm going to go ahead and read 1 through 8. Okay. At that time Jesus went through the grain fields on Sabbath, and his disciples were hungry, and began to pluck heads of grain and to eat. And when the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath." But he said to them, "Have you not read what David did when he was hungry? He and those who were with him, how he entered the house of God and ate the showbread, which was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those who were with him, but only for the priests? Or have you not read in the law that on the Sabbath day the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are blameless? Yet I say to you, in this place there is one greater than the temple. But if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless. For the Son of Man is Lord, even over the Sabbath." And you can go ahead and mark in your margin right there that I desire mercy and not sacrifice. That's Hosea 6:6. And we'll talk about that again. For now, let's go into Mark 2, and we're going to start in verse 23 through 27. Okay? Now it happened that he went through the grain fields on the Sabbath, and they went, his disciples began to pluck the heads of grain. And the Pharisees said to him, "Look, why do they do what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" But he said to them, "Have you never read what David did when he was in need and hungry? He and those with him, how he went into the house of God in the days of Abiathar the high priest, and ate the showbread, which is not lawful to eat except for the priests, and also gave some to those who were with him. And he said to them, The Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. Therefore the Son of Man is also Lord of the Sabbath." And notice again, they gave us in the days of, okay, and I'm saying Abiathar, if I'm mispronouncing that, but remember that when we're given names, we're given a timeline, so we can go back and trace that. Now let's jump into Luke 6, and we're going to read 1 through 5, okay? Now it happened on the second Sabbath, after the first, that he went through the grain fields, and his disciples plucked the heads of grain and ate them, rubbing them in their hands. And some of the Pharisees said to them, "Why are you doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath?" But Jesus answering them said, "Have you not even read this, what David did when he was hungry? He and those who were with him, how he went into the house of God, took and ate the showbread, and also gave some to those with him, which is not lawful for any but the priest to eat. And he said to them, The Son of Man is also Lord of Sabbath." So let's break that down a little bit. So remember that the Pharisees added over 1,500 laws. These are oral laws, right, to the Mosaic law. And so the Pharisees are going to accuse the disciples of doing 4 things, breaking 4 different laws, okay? And so write these down. This is when they're going through the grain fields, okay? This is reaping, thrashing, winnowing, and storing. Okay, these are 4 things that they're going to accuse them of for doing on the Sabbath, supposedly breaking the Sabbath law, which it is not. It is breaking the Pharisaical law. And when it says storing wheat, a fun fact here, they didn't have satchels of wheat thrown over their shoulder. Okay, so this is actually when they consume the wheat, when they eat it in their stomach, it would be considered storing it. This is how far out of hand and out of context that the Pharisees Pharisees took the law. Okay, another interesting one, and of course you would need to study back into Leviticus to know these laws, but one of them is that you can't boil a calf's head in its mother's milk. It's gross, right? But that doesn't mean, we're making a pot of milk over a fire. This is, if you were to consume the mother's milk, right, drink cow's milk, and then consume the calf, okay, eat it, okay, in your stomach would cause the milk to boil, and therefore you would be boiling the calf's head in the mother's milk. That's ridiculous. But that's what they thought. That's how far they take it. And so it's so much as so to say that when you consumed, when you ate it, you were storing that wheat. So they also accused him of breaking that law. So this is how ridiculous they are in this, okay? But again, Jesus appeals to the written word, right? So he tells you, he quoted Hosea 6:6, I told you, I desire mercy and not sacrifice. And he is speaking about this specifically on the Sabbath day, right? I told you we're going to go over this again and again, okay? That I desire mercy, not sacrifice. So you could heal. Healing would be a sign of mercy, okay? And so he desires the mercy, right? And instead of the sacrifice, right? So instead of giving everything up and having to make these sacrifices, he desires the mercy, the healing, right? And so, but of course, he accused them just recently of not even understanding or believing their own Mosaic law, right, going through Moses. And so, another thing, he points out that King David, so this would have been written before, that King David, they didn't condemn him. He ate. That's what he begins with in each one of these chapters here, that King David ate the bread that's not even lawful to eat, period, but he ate it and he gave it to other people, right? But yet you don't accuse him. And so Jesus is kind of contrary to that. And so something to note here is that rest was not commanded to all on the Sabbath, okay? It did not apply to those who worked in the compound, so the temple, right? So this is what Matthew is pointing out here, that they had a day of labor, actually, instead of rest, the priests and stuff. So the sacrifices were doubled on the Sabbath, and they had special rituals that they had to perform. So not only in the law, right, that excludes certain things, but the Pharisees. So not only what I'm saying there is that the law doesn't exclude everyone and include everyone for the day of rest, right? And so it has its parameters and things that it allows, right? But even the Pharisees, in their own Pharisaical law, have their own made up things that they're allowed to do on the Sabbath. Okay, and midwifery, right, having a child, circumcision, because we know it has to be on that specific day, the 8th day, okay, and the preparing of a corpse, a body, right? You're not just going to let a body sit overnight. And so they even had extensions to their own laws. That shows you how well they follow things here. And so Jesus never broke the law of Moses. Remember that. Never broke the law of Moses, okay? And so the law of Sabbath specifically was given to Israel, okay, in the Old Testament. And it does not transfer to the New Testament under the law of Christ. So something I spoke about in class, for those of you in my Sunday class, is that, we commonly practice this day of rest, right? And we collectively, as most denominations, say that day of rest is on Sunday. We call that what they used to call the Sabbath day. Now we just say day of rest. And so I want you to know that you were never commanded of that. And so not in the law, right, as far as the day of rest. So you will have heard, mostly passed down through generations, right, in the church or our grandparents, parents, okay, that we don't work on Sunday, right? Sunday we're taken off. This even goes to mainstream things such as Hobby Lobby and Chick-fil-A, okay? We don't work on Sunday. It would be nice to say that they just want to give the day off to afford their employees, to be able to go to church, which is wonderful, but it's also under the pretense that we don't work on Sunday, okay? You are not commanded to not work on Sunday. We have a lot of things that we go back to, that the Lord rested after his work was done, right? And so am I saying that you shouldn't rest? No, right? I'm saying that you need to understand why you're doing what you do. And you need to keep the word in context. It's not just we take a day of rest because grandma says that we don't work on Sunday, okay? And so I want you, I'm not going to give you your reasons, right? I want you to dig into scripture and to know and understand why you're doing what you're doing. And so this is fairly minimal, right? This concept of a day of rest compared to a lot of things that you can be studying into and why you say or do what you do, right? The name of my class is Context Gives Clarity, right? So when we break it down and we understand what we're doing, we're then able to give appropriate information. Because just imagine all of the things that you have repeated because those before you repeated it, right? And they're not even biblical. But you mean well, right? And so that's a start, right? That you mean well, but ultimately it is your job to edify yourself, right? To go dig into the word and find out, why do you believe what you believe? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. It's already at 12 minutes, and so we will pick right back up where we left off in the next video.